The champagne was the color of late afternoon sunlight, and the garden behind my future mother-in-law's house had been transformed into something out of a magazine spread. White hydrangeas in tall brass vases, string lights woven through the oak branches overhead. 72 people, our people, supposedly laughing and clinking glasses on a Saturday evening in September. My engagement ring caught the light every time I moved my hand, and for a moment, standing at the edge of the stone patio with the glass I hadn't touched, I thought, this is it. This is exactly what happiness is supposed to look like. I should have paid more attention to the fact that I was standing at the edge. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was 31 years old. I ran my own marketing consultancy, and I had built everything I owned from the ground up, starting at 24 with a laptop, a $3,000 savings account, and a studio apartment with a radiator that sounded like it was arguing with itself every winter night. By the time I met my fiancé, I had a team of 11 people, a client roster that included 2 nationally recognized brands, and a 2-bedroom condo that I paid for in full. No cosigner, no family money, just 7 years of not sleeping enough and caring more than anyone thought was reasonable. My fiancé is charming in the way that certain men are charming, meaning it looks effortless until you realize how carefully constructed it is. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party. He was funny. He remembered details. He asked questions and then actually listened to the answers, which I have since learned is rarer than it should be. We dated for a year and a half before he proposed, and in that year and a half I met his family 4 times. 4 times in 18 months. I told myself that was normal. I told myself a lot of things that I have since stopped telling myself. His mother was a woman who had opinions about everything and expressed them as though they were facts delivered from a slightly higher elevation. His sister was 28, unmarried, and had the particular energy of someone who had been told her whole life that she was the most important person in any room she entered. His father was quiet in the way that men become quiet when they have long ago stopped being the loudest voice in their own home. The engagement party had been his mother's idea. I had suggested something small. Close friends, a restaurant with good lighting, done by 10 o'clock. She had countered with 72 guests, a catered garden event, and a seating chart. I didn't fight it. I told myself I was being flexible. I told myself this was her way of showing she was happy for us. I should have asked myself why her happiness required my surrender of the original plan. The first hour of the party was fine. More than fine, actually. My best friend, who has been my best friend since the second week of college and who also happens to be an attorney, which will become relevant, was there with her husband. And she kept finding me across the garden and raising her glass and giving me the look that meant she was happy for me and also keeping an eye on things, because that is who she is. I floated through the crowd. I hugged people I hadn't seen in months. I stood next to my fiancé while his relatives told us how wonderful we were, and I smiled until my face felt like it belonged to someone else. Then his mother asked everyone to gather near the fountain for a toast. I assumed she was going to say something warm and slightly overlong about her son and how much she had come to care for me. That is what people do at engagement parties. That is the social contract. Instead, she tapped her glass, waited for the crowd to quiet, and said that she wanted to take this opportunity to welcome me into the family. She said the word family the way people say the word institution, with weight, with permanence, with an implication that once you are inside, the rules of the outside world no longer entirely apply. She said she wanted to share some of what it means to be part of their family. She said she believed in setting expectations clearly because clarity is a form of respect. I remember thinking, that's an unusual thing to say at an engagement party. She talked about how their family had always been close, how Sunday dinners were non-negotiable. Her word, non-negotiable. How the women in the family managed the household finances collectively, meaning all major purchases were discussed and approved as a group. How she expected her future daughter-in-law to be present and contributing, not just as a spouse, but as a full member of the family unit, which meant availability during holidays, weekdays when needed, and any occasion she deemed significant. She was smiling the whole time. The crowd was nodding in this vague, polite way that crowds nod when they're not entirely sure whether they've just watched something lovely or something alarming. My fiancé was standing next to me. I glanced at him. He was looking at the fountain. When she finished, people applauded. My future mother-in-law caught my eye and smiled at me specifically, with the particular warmth of someone who has just told you exactly how things are going to be and is pleased you didn't interrupt. I took a sip of my champagne. It had gone warm. My best friend appeared at my left elbow approximately 45 seconds later. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, which is one of the things I love most about her. I waited until the crowd had dispersed back into their conversations. Then I walked over to my future mother-in-law, who was accepting compliments near the hydrangea arrangement, and I waited until there was a pause in her conversation, and I said, "I'd love a few minutes with you. Would that be okay?" She looked pleased. She probably thought I was going to thank her. We moved to the far end of the patio, near the old iron gate that led to the driveway. Her husband drifted after us and stood slightly behind her, which was when I understood that this was not an accidental configuration. I asked her to help me understand what she meant by household finances being managed collectively. I asked specifically, did that mean that my business accounts, the revenue from my consultancy, would be part of that collective management? She said yes, of course, all family finances. She said it gently, as though this were a very natural and obvious thing, as though I'd simply not understood the first time. I said, and the Sunday dinners being non-negotiable. I often work with clients in different time zones, and my weekends can be unpredictable. Did non-negotiable mean every Sunday without exception? She said, when you're part of this family, family comes first. She said it still gently, but there was something underneath the gentleness now, something that had edges. I said, thank you for explaining that clearly. I walked back to where my fiancé was standing near the bar. He watched me come toward him with an expression I had never seen on his face before, which I would describe as the expression of a man who has known a conversation was coming for a long time and had spent that time hoping it wouldn't. I said his name quietly. I said, did you know she was going to say that tonight? He said he knew his mother had some things she wanted to share. I said, some things. He said his family had always had a certain way of doing things, and he thought once I got to know them better, I would see that it came from a place of love. He said his mother just wanted everyone to be on the same page. I said, the same page about my business income being managed by a committee? He looked at the fountain again. I said his name again. I said, look at me. He looked at me. I said, is this what you want? Is this the marriage you're picturing? He said he thought we could work it out. He said he loved me, and he knew this seemed like a lot, but his family was very important to him, and he had hoped I would come to see them the way he saw them. I stood there for a moment. The string lights were very pretty. Someone was laughing loudly near the catering table. My ring was catching the light again. I took it off. I held it out to him. He stared at it for a second like it was something he didn't recognize, which I understood because for a second I didn't quite recognize what I was doing either. And then everything became very clear, the way things become clear when you stop trying to see what you want to see and just look at what's actually there. I said, I'm not going to do this. I said it quietly, without anger, which surprised me. I thought I would be angry. Instead, I just felt like someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed for a long time. He said my name. He said, wait. I said, I'm not waiting. I went and found my best friend. I told her what happened in approximately 45 seconds. She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone who has been professionally trained to not look surprised and was currently using that training. She squeezed my hand and said, okay. She said, let's go. She said, I'll drive. We left. I did not say goodbye to his mother. I did not say goodbye to his sister, who had spent most of the party watching me with an expression I now retroactively recognized as evaluative. I kissed my former fiancé, on the cheek because we had been together for a year and a half, and that seemed like the right thing to do, and I left the ring on the bar because I did not want to carry it. In the car, my best friend drove for about 2 minutes in silence, and then she said, I have questions, but first I need you to know that you just did something very brave. I said I didn't feel brave. She said, that's usually how you know it's real. Here is what she did not know that night, and what I did not fully understand until the following morning, 3 months earlier. My fiancé and I had made an offer on a house together. It was a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb I had always liked, with a yard and good school districts and the kind of neighborhood where people actually know each other's names. The offer was accepted. We had been in the process of finalizing the purchase. The down payment was $160,000. I had contributed $130,000 of that. He had contributed $30,000, which had come, he told me at the time, from savings. I had since learned from an offhand comment made by his sister at a dinner 2 months ago that the $30,000 had come from his mother. His name was on the deed. Mine was on the deed. Both of us. My best friend is a very good attorney. I don't say that because she's my friend. I say it because she has a reputation in this city that precedes her, and more than one opposing counsel has regretted underestimating her. She also does not sleep very much, which I have always attributed to her being constitutionally wired differently than most people. She called me at 7:15 the next morning. She said, I've been thinking. She said, I've been thinking. She said, we need to talk about the house. I said, I know. She said, you put in 81% of that down payment? I said, I know. She said, his mother's $30,000 does not change what your money is. It changes what his money is. I said, what do I do? She said, you let me handle it, and you don't sign anything, and you don't agree to anything, and you don't have any conversations about this with him or his family without me present. She said, can you do that? I said, yes. She said, also, block his sister's number. Not because it's legally necessary, just because I know you and I know she's going to call you. His sister called me 11 times between 8 and 10 that morning, which is how I know she started before I blocked her. My fiancé. I need to stop calling him that, but the language hasn't caught up yet. Texted me 47 times. I know it was 47 because I counted before I stopped reading them. The first few were apologetic. The middle ones were explanatory. The last several had a different tone, a tone I recognized from the handful of moments in our relationship when he didn't get what he wanted. A tone I had always explained away as stress or exhaustion or some other benign cause. I forwarded the last 12 to my best friend. She called me back in 4 minutes. She said, okay, so we're definitely handling this. What followed was 3 weeks of legal process that I will not describe in full detail because it is not particularly interesting in narrative terms, and also because some of it is still subject to a confidentiality provision. What I will say is this. My best friend is thorough. My documentation was impeccable because I have always kept meticulous records, and the fact that I had paid $130,000 of a $160,000 down payment was not a matter of dispute. Numbers do not lie. Bank statements do not lie. During those 3 weeks, my future mother-in-law called me twice. I did not answer. She left voicemails that were remarkable in their competence. She spoke as though she were a reasonable woman dealing with an unreasonable situation that would soon be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. She said she hoped we could sit down and talk. She said she felt there had been a miscommunication. She said her son was devastated. I listened to the voicemails twice each. Then I forwarded them to my best friend, who said, good. Keep everything. His father called once. He didn't leave a message. His sister sent me a series of emails from an address I didn't recognize, which I assume means she realized her number had been blocked. The emails started formal and ended less so. In the last one, she said I was making a mistake I would regret. She said their family was offering me something most people would be grateful for. She said the structure wasn't about control. It was about unity. I thought about that word for a while. Unity. The way she used it, unity meant everyone moving in the same direction, which is the direction we choose at the speed we set. I thought about my consultancy. 11 people who trusted me to make good decisions, clients who had given me their brand identity and their marketing budgets and their reputations. 7 years of showing up exactly as I was, making my own calls, living with the consequences. I thought about what unity on those terms would have cost me. I wrote back once. I said, "I understand what you are offering. I respectfully decline." She did not write again. The house was resolved. My best friend negotiated the terms. Given the disparity in contributions and the fact that the purchase had not been completed with any formal partnership agreement, because we had been engaged, because we were supposed to be building a life, because I had trusted that good faith was sufficient documentation, the resolution was not everything I had put in, but it was close enough that I felt the ground under my feet again. I walked out of that process with the majority of what I had contributed, with my name off the deed, and with a clarity that felt like the first really clean breath I had taken in a year and a half. My fiancé signed the final documents on a Tuesday. My best friend was there. I was not. She told me afterward that he had looked tired. She said she thought he had genuinely believed it would work out differently, meaning he had believed I would come back, meaning he had believed, right up until the moment he held a pen, that his mother's version of events was the one that would prevail. I felt something when she told me that. Not satisfaction, exactly. Something quieter, a recognition. I canceled the vendors we had booked for the wedding, which was supposed to be in April. Most of them were understanding. One of them was not, and my best friend wrote a letter that resolved that situation in 11 days. I donated the dress. I had found it 6 weeks earlier, which feels now like finding something beautiful at the exact moment you are about to stop needing it. I kept my condo. I kept my company. I kept my Sundays. What I lost, if we're accounting fully, about 8 months of weekends that I could have spent differently. A version of the future I had been quietly building in my head for a year. The specific sadness that comes not from losing a person, but from discovering that the person you thought you knew was a partial invention, assembled from the details he chose to show you and held together by your willingness to fill in the rest with the best possible interpretation. He texted me once more, a month after everything was final. He said he hoped I was okay. He said he had done a lot of thinking. He said he realized he should have been more honest with me about what his family expected. I read it and I put my phone face down on my desk, and I finished the proposal I was writing for a new client, a regional food brand that wanted to expand nationally. And the proposal was good, one of the best things I've written, and the client signed 2 days later. I did not respond to the text. What I want to say to anyone who has sat in a garden full of string lights and felt the ground shift underneath them, the moment of clarity is not the same as the moment of confidence. You can know exactly what you need to do and still have your hands shake while you do it. You can leave without drama and still grieve in the car on the way home. You can be completely right and still feel, for longer than you think you should, like maybe you were too harsh, maybe you overreacted, maybe a different version of you would have found a way through. The question worth asking is not, was I too harsh? The question worth asking is, what would staying have cost me? Not in some abstract sense, specifically, concretely. What would I have handed over and to whom, and what would I have gotten in return? My best friend told me once, years ago, before any of this, over wine in her apartment after a long week, that the most important financial skill anyone can learn is knowing the difference between an investment and a tax. An investment, she said, you put in and you get a return. A tax, she said, you just pay. You pay it because the system requires it and you don't get to keep what you handed over. She said the same distinction applies to people and relationships and situations, and the tricky part is that taxes are often dressed up to look like investments, and the only way to tell the difference is to ask, very directly, what is the return here, and who controls whether I receive it? I have thought about that conversation many times in the past several months. I have also thought about something my future mother-in-law said in the middle of her toast that I almost didn't register because it was phrased so warmly. She said, in this family, we take care of each other. She said it like it was the most generous thing in the world. And I think, standing in that garden, part of me heard that and felt something loosen, because being taken care of sounds good, especially when you have spent 7 years taking care of everything yourself. It sounds like rest. It sounds like finally being somewhere safe. But the taking care was conditional. The taking care came with a seat at the table that also came with an invoice. You can be taken care of, she was saying, as long as you show up. Contribute your income, manage our schedules, come to our dinners, do it our way, and understand that your definition of yourself is now secondary to our definition of you. I have been taken care of by myself for a long time. It is not always easy, and it is not always comfortable, and sometimes it is very lonely. But it is mine. The returns come to me. I decide what to do with them. I am not interested in a different arrangement. My consultancy had a strong fourth quarter. We brought on 2 new clients in November, including a women's health brand that I am genuinely excited about. My team had our best year-end review in 4 years. I took 2 weeks off in December, which I have not done since I started the company. And I went to Portugal with my best friend and her husband and I, slept 9 hours a night, and ate very good seafood and walked along the coast in the early mornings when the light was doing something extraordinary over the water. I thought about the house sometimes, the yard, the school districts I will not be needing for a while longer. I thought about the engagement party, the string lights, the champagne going warm in my hand. I thought I was standing at the edge of that patio for a reason. Something in me already knew. I was just waiting to catch up to what I already knew. The iron gate at the back of that garden, the one that led to the driveway, the one I stood next to while my future mother-in-law explained the terms. I remember it made a particular sound when a gust of wind moved through the garden, a metallic, brief, clean sound, something opening. I am 31 years old. I ran the numbers on my own business last week, and I am ahead of every projection I made for this year. My best friend is coming over on Sunday, which is my Sunday, completely non-negotiable in the other direction. No one can require me to be anywhere on my Sunday except exactly where I choose to be. I choose to be here. That is the only arrangement I am willing to accept.